What's up, Redemption? How you doing? John Hendricks here, as always, for a brand new episode of the Threshing Floor podcast. Hopefully you guys had a great Labor Day weekend and got to celebrate cooking out, taking a day off. But we were recording Monday night to bring you this episode. We're sitting down with Mr. Guardian himself, Justin Alstad, and we're kind of talking about his, stepping away from the game, coming back, getting reacclimated. And then we're diving into kind of reviewing an article that he put out back in 2016 that I found on Land of Redemption when I first joined the game, and I thought it was pretty cool and kind of always wanted to, discuss the topic with him. So we talk about that a little bit. But glad you're here, and we'll get right into it. All right, guys, welcome into a brand new episode of the Threshing Floor podcast. My name is John Hendricks, as always. We've got Brad here. How you doing, Brad?
What's up, everybody? Feeling good.
Here we are recording episode number 65, and we have a return appearance from someone who has been on the podcast before, but not in a feature role. But here we are featuring him. It is the Guardian himself, Mr. Justin Alstad. How you doing?
Pretty good. What's up, everybody?
I figure we'll just go ahead and burn through the recent news because I mentioned last week that it was kind of a slow period for the game, and this week bears that fruit. We've got two videos from Tyler with his Tyler Talks, or whatever his YouTube channel is going to be called, but right now it's Tyler Stevens, and one of those is Support Overload, and the other one is Speed Freak Reborn. Speed Freak being a deck that I'm guessing is from a previous generation of the game that maybe I don't know about. Do you know anything about that, Justin?
As a matter of fact, I do. It's kind of an interesting segue. Speed Freak is the name. The original deck was from a deck I played in the 2003-2004 season. It was actually, it was not the first speed deck to be kind of part of the game, but I think it was one of the first, if not the first, to have really good success in tournaments. That was the deck I actually ended up winning Type 1 multiplayer at Nationals 2004, which is my very first Nationals, very first category, Type 1 multiplayer, and took it down with a deck I called Speed Freak.
Man, see, now I figured you might have some context of it. I didn't know that it was what you won a title with.
Yep.
So that is a pretty cool segue into, featuring our guest here. Now, Brad, did you sign up for the Lackey Grand Prix?
I never heard how many listens we had last week, so...
I believe we were sitting at 94 when the end of the third ended up hitting midnight. I checked it, and I think we were at 93 or 94.
Okay.
So I was off the hook.
What was it? You were at 100? Was that?
Yeah, if we got to 100 before the signups closed, technically, then I would have signed up.
I mean, I listened to last week's, so I played my...
You did your part.
I did my part.
We just needed a few other people to do their part, but I didn't have any decks built in Lackey yet, so it's probably a good thing because I would have been limping across the line to sign up.
The starter decks are preloaded at Lackey,
Oh, they are. They are preloaded, but I'm not sure how well you're going to do with a starter deck these days. Although you could probably use the basis of that and then splash in some of the stuff from the new set. So just put those color borders on color borders.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of helps make it easy. So the Lackey Grand Prix should be starting this week with round 1 of Series 12. And then Series 15 of the Zoom Discord Invitational is now open. So Brad, here we are another week later. Are you going to sign up for the Zoom Discord?
For Zoom. Hey, we'll say the same thing. If we get 100 before the sign-ups, then
okay,
we can do that.
Fair enough. I'm not entirely sure when the date or the deadline is to sign up for that. I didn't see that posted, but so if we get to 100, both me and Brad will play. That sounds fair.
Fair. We'll have to pick a night to deck build together or something.
Maybe we'll just play Speed Freak.
There you go.
There you go.
Tyler's already put the deck out. We just got to take it.
Well, you can play Speed Freak. I'll play Support Overload.
There you go. On Friday, we should also have Hymns House of Highlights. I know that I told everyone last week that we should have had a tournament, and apparently I was wrong. I got my dates mixed up. So I'm sorry, everyone that went and expected to be playing on Friday night. That should be happening this week, though, I believe. I tried to get confirmation from Jared before we recorded, and he ghosted me. So sorry, Jared, if I send people your way for no reason again this Friday night, but possibly a tournament for Hymns House of Highlights this Friday. And then the last thing I have here is a fundraiser update for our goal for raising $6,000 for packaging for the last two sets, Gospel of Christ and then Israel's Rebellion. We are at $4,890.
Nice.
So $4,890. So just a little bit more to go to get to the $6,000 goal, and that should have us putting those packages with the proper. Tyler told us last week that the barcode on the back matching the product would allow us to get it to retailers to put it in the hands of more new players. So that's really cool to see that we're getting closer to that goal. So that is the slow week of news here for the Redemption community. We got to get your brother back, Justin. We got to get Jaden back on the videos.
You know, I'm trying to get him to, for him and I to record some live games. We've got a nice game table in our basement, and get the overhead camera shot and get some live gameplay in. So I'm staying on his case. So we'll hopefully get something out here at some point.
Yeah, that would be awesome, seeing some live gameplay between two brothers going to war. And then we'll have to find a way to get the Chamber brothers to do it too, so we can eventually have Chambers versus Alstads. This whole back and forth thing. I mean, I saw the preview of your wall there, so maybe.
Little spoiler: the trophy wall is well in progress, and it's not quite finished. And I'm definitely gonna let Jaden be the one to show the finished product on his channel for one of his streams. But yeah, John got a sneak preview. It's looking pretty good.
It does look great. I guess we'll just transition into our main conversation here. Before we do that, do want to make sure that we let you know that, as always, the podcast is sponsored by our friend John Early over at Covenant Games. So make sure you go and check him out to buy your sealed product. And if you happen to want a vintage VHS of Angel Wars, my man's got you covered with good prices as well. So I don't know where you're going to get the VCR, but some people out there are listening like, what is a VCR? Whatever.
Hey, we actually know someone. Her name is Miss Betty. She has a VCR. So
Angel War videos were played quite often back in the day in Minnesota tournaments. That was we had a lot of younger players, so it was a great way to keep them distracted in between rounds and like while they were, after they were done before the next round started. So hey, if you got a younger play group, Angel Wars cartoons.
Definitely. I'm telling you, the intro though, like the voiceover intro is still fire to this day. That's my only cool thing about Angel Wars is I really like the intro.
Have you played it on the podcast before? Maybe you should. Or I don't know.
I have played it on the podcast. I'm really not sure how that one didn't get flagged for copyright, but I did play it on the podcast at one point, which was really cool. I also played like 20 or 30 seconds of Carmen, the courtroom. You remember that?
Oh yeah,
and
I love Carmen.
They flagged me so hard.
Wow,
yeah,
really?
They were like, copyright infringement. You cannot make money off this video. And I was like, joke's on you, because I don't make videos for money, because I would be broke. I would be
broke.
Hold on.
Broke.
There we go.
I was a huge Carmen fan back in the day. That was until I got introduced to a wider selection of Christian music. DC Talk, Newsboys. Before that, it was just all Carmen all the time.
Definitely really liked some of his videos and stuff that went with him as a kid.
Yep.
Courtroom was still like, it was one of those that as a kid, it kind of like gave me chills. I was like, what is he talking about? I don't know, but I like it. And then, what's the one where he's like going into like this old Western town? I've got my son hooked on that one.
Oh, yeah.
Satan Bite the Dust.
Satan Bite the Dust.
It's like, I've got two bullets. One's called the Word, and the other one's called Testimony.
Yes. Oh my gosh, you're gonna make me want to go watch that again now. Like, I'm getting the chills now.
I guess we'll just kind of start off here with a question that I've wondered myself for a while, and I have not asked anyone specifically, so I'll just ask you here at the source. Where the heck did the name The Guardian come from?
Yeah, so I think that was back when the Redemption message board was the Easy Board. I joined that in 2003 or 2000, maybe it was in 2002, somewhere around there. Kind of learned about the larger Redemption community. Pretty much before that, I had no idea that there was even a larger Redemption community. So jumped on the Easy Board, had to pick a screen name, and at the time, one of my favorite cards was Guardian of Your Souls, and that was kind of what I went with. Interestingly enough, there was actually another member that had just the name just Guardian, but apparently he was not very active, and I think he at one point said something about it, but that was like the last time he ever posted. So I don't know, maybe I took his name and he just didn't like that. But
you ran him off.
Something,
but
I don't know.
You specified you were the Guardian.
I was
was just Guardian.
Yeah, the Guardian. So yeah, I don't think I ever met him in person or like knew his actual name, but yeah, they didn't see it as being the same name, so I guess I got that one.
Well, that's cool, because you also are from a family that has a pretty cool name, being that you all are referred to, I guess, depending on who's referring to you, maybe affectionately or whatever, Fortress Alstad,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're the Guardian. So it kind of works together. Maybe you were the Guardian of the Fortress. Who knows?
Something like that, yeah.
You know, you could probably get some money because Cleveland just changed their name to the Guardians. So you need to follow up on that.
They owe me a little stipend, but yeah, actually the Fortress Alstad, gosh, I have no idea how far back that got introduced, but yeah, it is true. I'm the oldest of 6 siblings, and all 6 of us did play the game at one point or another. I've got 3 brothers and 2 sisters. And then of the 6 of us, Jade and I still play, obviously. Jordan Alstad, who some people might remember or have seen his name, he played for quite a few years. He was on the Elder team. And then our sister Britta, she still plays occasionally. We've hosted tournaments at her church, and she's, of course, married to Tim Molly, who's also a former player. Doesn't play much these days, but he still likes teaching the game. So he likes teaching younger players kind of the basics, and he kind of got out of the game when it was a lot to keep up with, and he was one of those guys who, if he was going to be in the game, he wanted to be fully in it and be competitive, and he just didn't have time for that in his life. And so now he and Britta both really like teaching the game and kind of being that part of it. They don't really lead a play group, but they've got some young people at the church that Britta works at that they're introducing to the game. So
they're training curious minds.
Yeah, that's kind of their role. Like, they're not super involved in like the Redemption community at large, but trying to pique some interest and kind of help us grow our Minnesota play group again.
You mentioned that you had several siblings that played the game, or at least was interested in the game. Jordan, Jaden, and at least you said Britta.
Yep. Yeah, my other 2 siblings, Jonathan, he was actually a pretty involved player back in like 2004, 2005, kind of that earlier. Jonathan actually finished 2nd at the largest Type 1 event ever at Nationals. When Nationals was in Minnesota in 2005, Jonathan finished 2nd in Type 1. And actually, if we'd been going by today's tiebreaker rules, would have finished first. The guy that finished first, Jonathan beat him. But back then, the tiebreaker was lost soul differential. It wasn't head-to-head. and the other guy had a better soul differential. So Jonathan finished second.
Do you think you guys just having access to siblings that played, is that what led to, by all accounts, like all of you were decent, at least you're talking about one brother that finished second at the biggest tournament ever for Type 1. We know what Jaden's done. Jordan has a reputation. Obviously, I think when I did Mr. Classic stuff, if I'm not mistaken, you have more titles than anyone else.
Yep.
By all accounts, you guys are really good. Do you think just having access to players that played, within your own home, is that kind of what led to it? Or you guys just have a certain mindset for this type of, card game?
Yeah, it was definitely you definitely get that iron sharpens iron type thing when you have people that, play the game. And we were all very competitive. So, we wanted to beat each other. And, that meant you had to, keep playing. And you couldn't just, not practice and not get games in. But it also helped that we had a very vibrant Twin Cities kind of redemption community back in those early 2000s, from about 2003, probably all the way up to 2011, I would say. You could literally go to a redemption tournament every weekend somewhere in Minnesota for like about a year, maybe 2 years, kind of back in that 2003 to 2005 range. There was, they were in different places. There was a Rochester, Minnesota group. There was a group in Austin, Minnesota, and then the Twin Cities group, obviously. So there were literally months where I was going to a tournament every weekend.
So it almost got like Pokemon style for you guys as far as popularity.
Yeah, a little
in your
bit.
Local area.
Yeah, I mean, it was like the biggest group was at my church, and so that was, obviously it was very involved with that. That was the group that Bill Voigt led for many years, and there was a lot of us that were like old enough players that we kind of helped him out with the tournaments a lot, but then we were also playing, so it was just we were able to host really big events. So there was actually one year, this is probably in 2005, the year that we held it in Minnesota and had over 250 people for nationals. But earlier that year, there was a local tournament that we had like 80 people show up for a local.
80 people for a local. That's nationals this year, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, I guess that was a hotbed for redemption back in the day.
Yep.
With all that success, you did kind of step away from the game, I guess, about the same time that like COVID became a big deal. I know that I went to my first nationals in Texas, and it was like there was so many people that weren't involved in the game at that point, or at least traveling to tournaments or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that some of the thought was, well, we might lose some of these people. They might not come back, step away from the game. A lot of times it seems like there's a thought that maybe they, are just done with that phase of playing the game or whatever. But it's nice to see that you have come back and transitioned to that. So maybe could you explain maybe the reason why you took that step away? Because you were pretty involved. You were like on the leadership team at the time and all of that. So it's kind of a big deal for you to step away.
Yeah, so I've had a couple stretches of years where I've been less involved. After so in 2007, that was Kansas City Nationals, and then the following, so after that Nationals, I was really involved in the game, and then 2008, I missed Nationals that year because I had one of my good friends was getting married that same weekend, and so I missed that one, and that kind of, I don't know, maybe put me in a little bit of like, I just, I was like, oh, I missed Nationals, and now I just kind of want to take a little bit of a break. So from like 2008 till about 2011, I took a bit of a break, just not playing as much. I didn't get to 08, 09, or 2010 Nationals. Part of it was my job situation starting in 2010 was extremely busy during the summer, so that was part of it. Then 2011, Nationals was in Minnesota. I went to that one, obviously, because it was hosted at my church. But I still wasn't playing a whole lot during the year just because other life stuff, work stuff. Then in 2013, came back. That was the New York Nationals. Got back into the game, and then from 2013 to 2017, I had probably my best stretch of, playing competitively, with, playing in Minnesota, and then, regionals, nationals finishes. I think I won nationals in multiple categories, type 2, mostly in type 2. And then in 2018, I think I missed that year's nationals. I don't remember what that one was for. And then, again, just kind of took a little bit of a break after that. And then, so I was still involved, but wasn't playing as much. Our play group kind of didn't really disperse. It just kind of, people started getting into other things. So we had tournaments less frequently. And then 2021, I again missed nationals because of a wedding. So I was at nationals at 2020, kind of the small COVID year. 2021 I missed, and so yeah, during that, so it's kind of during this last hiatus, I guess you could say, not to steal that from Tyler. It was mostly just I was pursuing other hobbies, other life situations, and was definitely not anything negative, like where I was, burned out on the game or burned out with, whatever, people in the community, nothing like that. Yeah, I just was pursuing other things, and just wasn't making it a priority. And yeah, so that was kind of the story on that. I think as far as like being like a play tester and kind of on the elder team, I did a little bit with LOC and GOC development, but not nearly as much as I had been for the sets before that. I think Prophecies of Christ was kind of the last set that I had a lot of, participation in, as far as like the play testing and creation of that set. And then kind of from LOC forward, I took a step back and just kind of was more of a, kind of poked my head in here and there, when I was invited to, either make suggestions or play test and stuff like that.
So with all of the breaks that you've taken and missing nationals, and the fact that you are already have more titles than anyone else, you could say you're just kind of giving everyone else a chance to catch up. we can use that there.
I started playing. I should mention, so back in the day, kind of going back to that a little bit, I started playing Type 2 kind of early in my, competitive redemption career, I guess you could say, or whatever, because a lot of it was because I was tired of, like, me and my brothers, like, we just kept running into each other in tournaments, and it was like, we were the toughest competition we had, and it was like, well, why don't you just play Type 1 and I'll play Type 2? That way we both get to win. Or, have a better chance. So that was, but then Jordan started playing Type 2 as well, and then I had to go, battle him in Type 2, and, there was a couple years where I won Type 2 at Nationals in 2013, and he won it in 2014, and I won it in 2015, and we just kind of went back and forth a little bit. But yeah, so that was kind of the, and now, letting Jaden kind of take over Type 2 for a few years there, that's fine with me. I'm okay with that.
Do you miss the side of it being involved in helping develop those sets, or is it just kind of a relief not having that responsibility and being able to just appreciate the game itself?
I'd say it's a little bit of both. If it gets to a point where they are looking for me to jump back in, I think I probably would do it, but I'm certainly not expecting, like, they've got a really good team. John and Gabe, Marcus and Tyler and Chris. I think Joe, I think those are the main kind of play test, elder, kind of development team. I'm certainly willing to jump in, although I don't know if I can necessarily, commit to what they'd be looking for, as far as a, time commitment for, like, kind of the full development. If they ask me to jump in and help play test some stuff, I think I'm back to a point where I can commit to some of that. But I think right now the biggest thing that I want to try and do is kind of enter the host role for tournaments in Minnesota, trying to kind of regrow the Minnesota play group. We've got a couple like preteen age students at my church that are very interested in the game, and then one of their dads is also very getting into the game, and so we've got a nice little foundation. We've got a few players that have kind of been around the whole time. Nathan Voigt is one of them. We got another guy, Jonathan, not my brother, but a different Jonathan, who's been around a long time. And they're both still interested in the game. And then Bill Voigt, Nathan's dad. So we've got a nice little core of people that I think we can try to kind of get a group going again. Obviously, I don't think ever going to get back to the numbers that we had back in the early 2000s, but I wouldn't say it's outside the realm of possibility that we could get to the numbers that would be needed for a nationals back in Minnesota at some point. So I think that's where my primary focus will be. It's like during the regular season of redemption, I guess you could say, and then trying to do stuff online and stuff to kind of prepare myself to be a little more competitive at future nationals.
Like signing up for these tournaments like Brad's gonna do.
Exactly.
That'll help you out.
Yeah. So I signed up for Lackey Grand Prix, and I was in the Rob M's tournament, and then I think I'll probably do that again. So yeah, I enjoy playing, and one of the things, honestly, like when I kind of stepped away a little bit, was just there wasn't a lot of that going on at the time as far as online play, and I've definitely found that I need to get games in, or I start to lose interest, because I love deck building, I love brewing up new deck builds, but then I actually want to play them, and if I don't get that chance to play with them, then it's my interest kind of fades a little bit. So
that's fair. I have been in that boat to where like you're really excited about this deck, and then there's no tournaments because we don't have a good local play group here. Not yet, right, Brad? Not yet.
Not yet.
We have some tournaments with Jeremy every now and then it's just the big ones for the tournament season. So I definitely get that side of it.
Yep.
But like last week on the podcast, Brad, you were mentioning that coming back into the game, like for nationals or whatever, and just reading the GOC cards and comparing to what like you knew from LOC or whatever. GOC was like ratcheting things up, going up another level. It was kind of like Emerald, like, we're gonna kick it up a notch, and just a lot of different things. Cards were doing several different things. Seems like every card was drawing 2 or more, and it seems like the speed just kind of cranked up with GOC. So when you came back and GOC was now kind of the thing, the hot new toy on the shelf, how did it take getting acclimated to that, and then how did that compare to, you last mentioned that you were less involved, after 2020, so you didn't get to see like the heavy LOC era or meta, and then right into the GOC. So how did that compare to kind of where you left off and then picked up with GOC?
Yeah, so I mean, I still, even this past nationals, was not super familiar with GOC. I think I did participate in some of the online tournaments when LOC was kind of the new thing, but I didn't ever play in the LOC only events. I always did the regular event. So yeah, GOC was definitely I knew I didn't know it very well, and that was even at this past nationals, I only had one GOC card in my deck, and that was Crouch Choice, because that's a pretty easy one to play. But I knew some of the strategies and some of the common, things that I had to be thinking about, just from, obviously, being around Jaden and, kind of, he showed me some things. But yeah, I was definitely, in Nats 22, GOC had just come out, and I saw some things with that. The Nats 22 was, I think, just phase 1 of GOC at that point.
Yeah, phase 2 came out at nationals.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so there wasn't even the full GOC at Nats 22. And then, yeah, and I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to like GOC phase 2. Like I had mentioned, I did a little bit. I helped with a little bit with the development of phase 1, and then phase 2 of GOC is kind of where I didn't really do a whole lot as far as like development, play testing, stuff like that. I just kind of, completely stepped away for the time. Like I think we still hosted like 1 or 2 tournaments a year in Minnesota, but I was not, doing the work, as you might say, to keep up with, the current strategies. And so it was pretty eye opening, I guess, in the sense I knew that it was going to be, but it was still like, there was stuff that I was finding out and at nationals, in Type 1, the big event, and I knew it going in, but it was still like, man, I wish I would have maybe done a little bit more work getting prepped. So with Mr. Classic, it was really easy for me to just pick up the classic cards, build a deck. I knew what I liked. I knew what I had played with that. And I feel like that almost kind of gave me a false sense of like, oh, I can just do the same thing with like the new rotation sets, but I can't because I never actually like used those. So
I guess you mentioned there that you get really, engaged by the challenge of deck building and then playing. And it seems like with your level of success, maybe the competitive side of the game being like highly competitive kind of, I don't know if that amps you up a little bit. I would say that, like, at least from Jaden, reading Jaden, I feel like it does amp him up, but he's never going to show it. So I don't know if you kind of are the same way. But how did you enjoy the kind of setup of Mr. Classic? And then did that kind of pull you in? Because you had just came back to Nationals. And then I guess at that point you were given an invite to this thing called Mr. Classic that I don't think anybody really knew what it was going to be. They were just like, we're going to run this tournament. It's going to be this. We've got this belt that John Early's wearing. And it was just kind of this complete unknown, but it was kind of really cool because it was like, we're trying to get the top players in the history of the game, and to be considered one of those, did that kind of spark that fire for you?
a little bit, yeah. Like not right away, probably just because, like you said, no one really knew, what was, when it was first announced, like, what it would actually look like. Was there actually going to be a weekend where you get like all 8 people or, eight of the top players to come for a tournament, and how is it going to look like? Obviously it wasn't going to be a nationals, like, but so are people even going to be motivated to show up? And so I, maybe right away I was just kind of like, yeah, if it works out for me, I'll do it. And then as it got closer and it was like, oh yeah, this thing is happening. Like, this is going to be, we've got this lineup confirmed, and, these players joining. I was like, all right, yeah, like I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna try and do well. I definitely enjoyed doing the interview with you as one of the, when you did the lead up interviews. That was pretty fun. And then listening to all the other ones on the way there, definitely enjoyed that. It was pretty funny to hear Tyler pretty much predict everything that everyone was going to do. He nailed me pretty good, but I still beat him. So
Well, that's all that counts.
exactly. Yeah, you can know what's coming, but if you can't stop it, then like that's doesn't matter.
Absolutely. So with Mr. Classic, I guess everyone would say that from just that initial thought to having the tournament, it's hard to picture anyone saying that it was not a success. We even got to have the community wildcard play in, and not only did Mark make it and travel all the way from New York, but then had the upset that, not to bash John or anything, because upsets are going to happen in competitive, atmospheres, but to actually have that play out. And that was pretty cool because we had built up so much about the community wild card in this. And you talk about that podcast, and it was super fun recording all those. But all I remember is, like, for the next week, my voice was shot. I think I even did the intro to tell people about the interviews or whatever, and I had no voice. It was cracking and everything.
I remember that, yeah.
And the editing side of that, man, I probably spent like 12 plus hours editing the thing
Yep.
and putting it together. But it was definitely fun, and I really liked the thing that really killed my voice was cutting that promo for Mr. Classic, like the wrestling style promo.
Yeah.
Top 8 in the history of the game.
Yep.
And it was all fun until like the next day when my voice was shot. But I put a lot of effort into that, and I enjoyed it. And we went and we had the tournament and seeing you guys and doing the commentary for it. I thoroughly enjoyed just about everything about it. I think there was hope that we would have a few more players show up, you know, apart from the ones that were playing in the tournament, just a few more spectators and things,
Yep.
and have a bigger tournament that next day. But we still ended up with like close to 30 players.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, part of that is just, it's the first time, no one's never ever done before. I mean, like I think back to another, Minnesota, we had the Type 2 only tournament for many years. And,
Yep.
the first couple of years we did that, it was just a Minnesota thing, and Bill Voigt put that together as kind of a, he wanted us Type 2 players, because like, a lot of times the tournaments back then, there'd be like, everyone played Type 1, and then there was like me and maybe one or two other people would play Type 2, and so we would get like 2 games in every tournament. And so Bill's idea was just, hey, let's have a tournament that's only Type 2, so that, the Type 2 players that want practice for the big tournaments get, 4 or 5 games in a tournament, like kind of like a national setting. And then everyone else who is not normally a Type 2 player can get a little introduction into Type 2 to kind of dip their
A
toe
little
in the water.
exposure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe and we actually, we had players that once they gave it a try, they're like, oh yeah, this is actually kind of fun. Like and they ended up playing, they didn't all convert to just playing only Type 2, but, if there was, a bunch of Type 1 players and they thought, hey, you know what, maybe I'll just do Type 2 because I've got, there might be 2 Alstads playing Type 2, but they're still a third place, So, but then through that, we ended up getting a lot of good Type 2 players. And like, it got to a point where it wasn't just me and Jordan, finishing first and second, or me and Jaden finishing first and second. Nathan Voigt became a very good Type 2 player. We had another Nathan Leverson became a very good Type 2 player. He placed at nationals. I think it was the first one in Texas, where he finished ahead of both me and Jaden. Some other ones I'm forgetting, but other players who definitely became very, very strong Type 2 players, and a lot of that came out of the Type 2 only tournament. But kind of going back to the Mr. Classic, like it wasn't a big tournament the first couple of years, and it just kind of grew until we were getting people from out of state, just like we were hoping for with Mr. Classic, where we got Gabe and some of his guys coming up from Iowa. We had Josiah came out one year for the Type 2 only. Jonathan Gomez came out one year. Alex Olahar, who just kind of jumped back into the community, he came one year for the Type 2 only. And so, all these people that, started coming from out of state for this, this one tournament where it was just, Type 2 and Type 2 multi.
So with that, I guess, with an expectation that if we have it again, it's going to grow and just keep working on getting better. I hope that's the case. I know that the plan is for us to do it again. So with that, are you, as one of the, I guess, the participants in that top 8 tournament, are you looking forward to challenging for that belt? I know it's right there on the wall behind you.
Yeah, it's literally.
Everyone on the podcast can't see it, but I can't see it right now. But I know it's there.
Yeah, it's literally sitting right in front of me, just off to the left of left. Where I'm
that's
sitting.
right, because you turned the camera around.
Yeah. I'll let Jaden do the big reveal of the trophy wall. But yeah, it's sitting kind of smack dab in the center of the trophy wall, and I definitely want to move that to my side of the trophy wall.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm thinking. And have you guys kind of done any trash talking with that?
Not really. I think we're, my brothers and I, we definitely competed against each other and, wanted to beat each other, but we were never sour or like, mad when the other person won. Like if it wasn't going to be one of us, we definitely wanted the other one to win. That's not to say that, every time that, Jaden won and I didn't, that I was like, happy and like,
But all wins build up the fortress.
exactly. Yeah. It kind of got to that point where it's like, you know, yeah, like it was anything that, keep it in the family. That's kind of our goal now is, it'd be, if it came down to the same next year where it was me and Jaden in the finals and he got me again, it would definitely be a little bit frustrating. But just keep it in the family, keep it in the fortress.
So, and Brad, I know you're hanging out over there and you're not really involved in the conversation here, but the next conversation, hopefully you get some good stuff out of that, so you can learn how not to be put on tilt. But one last question before we move on to that conversation is, as a former person that was involved as a player all the way up to being involved with the elder team, helping with set development, play testing, and all of that, what is your thoughts on the current direction of the game? Obviously, we've been focused on like new player experience. You've talked about hosting, your sister, and Tim, you mentioned being involved, trying to teach the game, but not necessarily worried about the super competitive side. So knowing that the game's moving to transition to kind of focus on that with new starter decks, kind of cleaning up the wording and maybe simplifying some of the abilities. What do you feel about, like, how do you feel about that direction of the game, and how does it compare to maybe some of the ways that the game has, or how has it evolved to that from all of your history throughout because you've been around since, I mean, you started talking about tournaments in 2002, 2003. So, I mean, you have at least got 20 years of, exposure to the game.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to keep in mind is that change is rarely easy, and I would say that especially when I was more heavily involved with the development, like we had different types of people on the team, which was good. It made us kind of challenge each other, and ideas were like kind of thought through. But we had people like me who were a lot of times resistant to change, didn't want to maybe always jump into something that was going to be a huge change. Then we had other people that were a little more like, oh yeah, we need to do this in order to to improve the game. We had other people that were kind of in the middle, like sometimes they'd be on board, sometimes they'd be a little more hesitant. So we had a good mix of people like that, especially when I was involved. And then other players, like when Tim Molly was involved, he was definitely kind of more like a traditionalist, I guess you could say, where let's keep the game kind of the look for ways to improve, but generally keep it the same. Like and then obviously I kind of stepped away from that role, and there's obviously been a lot of changes in the game in the last couple years, which I think for the most part have been pretty good. I can't say that I would be like 100% on board with everything that has been done. I guess mostly in terms of like some of the rule changes, but I can at least like I don't think it's been anything that's like there's been nothing that I've like come back to and it's been like, oh wow, I am not sure I even want to like play anymore. Certainly nothing like that. Just things that it's like, oh, did we really have to do that? But I trust the guys that are making those decisions. Obviously I know them all, and I know that they have the best intent for the game. So I'm just I'm okay with trusting that if they make a decision to make a change, that they've got the best interest of the game at heart, and that if it's something that they get wrong, I feel like they're the kind of guys who are willing to say, yep, we got this wrong, we're going to make another adjustment or do something else to kind of fix that. So yeah, I'm pretty confident in the team that's kind of leading the development, and I do like the direction that we're going with, like Israelites Rebellion, and the new starter deck. Like I like the kind of the simplified stuff. I think it's kind of been pretty well established that the power creep on GOC maybe got a little bit turned up a little bit too much, and kind of pulling back from that I think is a good thing. Sometimes you need a set like that, like GOC. I think it's been talked about before. I thought I remember on one of the podcasts that I listened to from you guys where the Warrior set was definitely way higher power than anything that had previously been done, but it more or less saved the game from kind of dying out, because it got people interested. It made the game a lot more complex and therefore more interesting and more attractive for people to want to actually invest in it and do some do more with it.
Definitely a good way to look at it. And I think maybe it was even last week I drew the comparison to when Warriors first came out, because I was giving rib shots to Tyler about the fact that some people consider his set that he took from start to end as the lead designer as a watered down set, which I mean I think it's just another one of those things to where, like, when you have the power creep of GOC, anything short of that is going to feel like it's quote unquote watered down, even though it's probably healthy for the game to pull back and get to that level of power within the set. But another thing that I want to talk to you about is when I first got involved with the game, just a little bit of backstory here, and I helped out. Gabe asked for, anybody that had time that wanted to help out with Land of Redemption, and I was like, oop, me, I've got time. What can I do for you? And we were trying to think of ways to generate some content, and there wasn't a lot of online content for the game, but there was this wealth of articles that had come out, 4-5 years back, or at least that's how some of them dated, on Land of Redemption. And some new players, because it had gotten buried, wouldn't be able to find that unless they knew what they were looking for. So one of the things that we did was Spotlight, and we did this, like, what do we call it, like the hashtag that people do, like Throwback Thursday or something. And we went and we found a couple of articles, and one of the articles that I found was this learning from your peers, and all of them are actually really good. There's one that Gabe put out about being on tilt or whatever, knowing your role, whether it's you're the I forget the terminology he used, but whether you're the player that's reacting or leading the the state of the game at the time. And another one was the bad beat, and this was one that you put out. And I remember when I first started the podcast, I jotted down ideas, and I went back to a lot of those old articles, and I was like, it'd be cool to do a podcast talking about this with this guy. And here we are, 65 episodes later.
Finally got there.
Here you are, and here we are. We can talk about it, because I thought it was really cool, because when I first came into the game, I played with Jay, and Jay used to aggravate me when I played him. And he would tell me that that was part of the game, is like, if you can put someone on tilt or whatever, like, you have to, it's kind of like the game within the game is how you can, like, push buttons of people. And I don't know what everyone's take on how far you can go with that. We can talk about that. But then your article was like, when something breaks in the game that's doesn't go your way, whether that's a misplay, whether that's, you got a bad draw, how do you not let that spill over and affect this, and then spill over and affect your other rounds? So I guess just hear from you, since you put that article out, what would a bad beat mean within the context of our game?
Yep. So a bad beat, it's a term that comes from poker, and it just generally means either something goes very unlucky for you, or it goes very, very lucky for your opponent, or it could just be, something that, you made a misplay that, maybe shouldn't have cost you as much as it did. And it just, so in short, just kind of something that doesn't go your way, whether it's bad luck for you, good luck for your opponent, and then it just kind of completely flips the momentum of the game, where maybe you were in a really good position and then all of a sudden your opponent top decks the exact card that they need, and they play it, and it just completely turns the game from in your favor to like now you're like way behind. So when you hear the term bad beat, that's kind of where that comes in as far as like a redemption sense.
Brad, have you had any of those situations in your games? Because I feel like there's a couple of games where we've played to where it's like, dude, you did this and that, and I just couldn't do anything. Or like last week you were talking about somebody setting up on you so fast, and you're like, I couldn't play my deck the way that I wanted to. And then that kind of spills over into that mental aspect game of like, it's frustrating in that moment. It's frustrating that game, but then you go to the next game and you're thinking about that game. So do you think that's happened to you as a player, being a newer player to the game? I don't know how much background. I know you played some card games, but I hadn't played much extensively until playing Redemption, and it feels like that describes like half of my early games, like some of those 3-hour games we would play, learning how to play.
As far as misplays go, I could definitely tell that I had been out of the game for a while whenever I was at Nationals, because there was a couple times I just made some boneheaded plays, and I do feel like I got to the point where I was like, there's no recovering from this. I remember one time I was trying to catch up in the game, and I finally caught a break, like where I could play my deck how it was supposed to be played. And so I'm like flipping all my meat characters out there, and I'm doing all this stuff, and I get in a battle, and of course I'm running Impartial Judgment, and I got it all. I got Ride On Victoriously. I got Impartial Judgment. I go in. I got this whole thing covered. I'm thinking of every scenario. Boom, boom, boom. I play it, and I forget if either his hand was protected or maybe it got tossed because it wasn't on the right guy or something, or I couldn't play it. I can't remember. But I ended up wasting my Dominant, wasting Impartial Judgment, and wasting my Rescue all in the same like thing. So it was like, I think that was definitely one of them. And one time I went in and did a bunch of stuff, and they didn't have a soul for me to rescue. Like I didn't even like pay attention to that. I was just like, oh man, I can't believe this.
I can tell you as a new player, that one happens a lot, where you go in, you've got this big rescue, and you're like, I don't have a soul. I'm not going to block.
Yep. And it's like, you use all these resources. It's just like, oh, well, and it just feels like, man, I just wasted all this. And maybe I even had like a way to get a soul and just, completely fumbled it. So,
yeah. So how often do you guys think that having that situation, how often would that lead to you being on tilt, or your opponent? Like if you see your opponent go through a situation like that, does it lead to the quote unquote tilt? And I guess tilt would just be kind of a prolonged, allowing one bad play to affect moving forward. One of the famous stories is John Early and his play against Jay, to where he was doing something, and it was like if Judas Iscariot is in play or something, and he had him in play. I forget what the setup there of that story was. It's been on the podcast. You'd have to go back to some foreign episode, but just kind of like something that you missed, like game state wise. And you mentioned Tim not wanting to be involved too much with the competitive side now, because things do so much and the game has so many layers. And within those layers is like, okay, I can miss that, and now it affects several turns later. But how often do you think, in your experience, Justin, that those bad beats lead to a player being on tilt?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be different for each person. I kind of talk about that in the article, where everyone's got a different personality. Some people, if they're not super competitive and something doesn't go their way, to them it's no big deal. Obviously, the more competitive you get, the higher potential a bad beat is going to have to like put you on tilt and affect future decisions, maybe in that game, or maybe even in other games in that particular tournament. So for me, I know that and I'm definitely competitive. I want to, I'm not a win at all costs type of person, but like I typically don't play an event um, just only for the fun aspect. Like having fun, getting together with people at nationals is awesome. But if I'm playing an event, I want to do well, and I fully recognize, like even going in this past year's nationals, like I knew that I was not going to be competing for, a top 5 or top 3 spot. Like I just, I knew that going in, I was just not gonna, I hadn't done the work, I hadn't done the practice, putting it in, but I still wanted to do the best that I could with the deck that I knew fairly well, and so when I made a misplay or I missed a line of play, it did, it did affect me. Like I knew that, like, oh man, if I had just, taken this line instead of that line, maybe I get one more soul. Maybe instead of a tie, I get the full win, stuff like that. And I think it's important to not let a bad beat affect you for too long. Like it's the best players take a situation like that, and they learn from it, and then they just kind of they let it go. And there's been times where I've done better at that, and there's been times where I've not done as well with that. So even this last week, I played a game with somebody in Rob M's tournament, and I lost a close game, and then kind of going back through the game in my head, I was like, oh, I realize now that I missed a line I could have taken to, for me to win that game 5-4 instead of losing 4-5. And so I think that, it's okay to dwell on those things. You're probably better off doing it after the tournament's done. So like in this case, it was just the game for the week. So it wasn't like I was playing another game right away. And so that can be harder, like especially at nationals where you don't have necessarily time in between rounds to kind of go back and reflect on and one individual game. Maybe if it was a super fast game that you lost, but then if that's the case, then do you really, maybe it's because you lost really bad, so there was nothing you could do. So it's tough to do that in a like a bigger tournament situation where you might have to wait until after the tournament's done, and then you can kind of go back through your games and like, okay, did I make any misplays, or did I make any plays that could have been more optimal? Like sometimes you make a play and it looks like the most optimal play, and then you go back and realize, oh, there was another thing I could have done, but it wasn't necessarily a bad play. So I think to become a really good top player in any card game, really, not just Redemption, you need to be able to do that kind of, in the moment, brush it off, and then later on go back and look at it, analyze it, and then learn from it.
How much of that do you think? Because you mentioned their personality, and sometimes players just have a personality that allows for other things to come naturally, like something like this. I would say that if I had to guess, you have a personality that would be well suited for this type of, letting it roll off your back a little bit more than, say, somebody that's highly competitive and is one of those win at all cost type of people. But they build their deck in a way to where I'm going to win or I'm going to lose, and then they get mad when they lose type of thing.
Yeah.
But how much of that is just a natural thing that you have with your personality trait or just the way that you are as a person? And then how much of that can be learned and kind of built up over time as you get more experience in tournaments?
Yeah, I think for me, it does affect me, but I think I do have a pretty good grasp of my emotions. I think I mentioned in the article, that when the bad beat happened in that particular game, I just kind of, I let it roll off. I took a second to kind of refocus and just kind of like, okay, now that this has happened, what do I need to do to try and win this game? And then my opponent, even after the game, mentioned like, man, that was crazy. Like that happened, and then you just seemed to like lock in. Like he was impressed that I just completely it didn't phase me. Like inwardly, it was rough, and I'm like, oh my gosh, did I just blow this tournament? Like I know I need to win all my games if I have a chance to finish first. Like did I just I took a I made a play that wasn't necessarily wrong, and it just got really unfortunate outcome. But I was like, okay, now what do I need to do? Let's focus. Let's just not worry about that. We can't change that. Let's just go forward. So I think outwardly I'm able to not make that or like not show it. I guess you could say it's having a good poker face, again, to kind of use a poker term. Some people, they might get a little more outwardly, visibly frustrated. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, we're all human. And some people, the emotions, and that might be what they need. Like they might need to, hopefully not like, swear or something or like, but, just kind of.
Where's
like,
Matt at when you need him?
Like they need to kind of have that like outward expression of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened. And then maybe that's what they need to kind of, vent a little bit, get it out of their system, and then they can keep going forward and, use that. So, so everyone's different. It does help to have the experience, like when you've had experiences like that, and like, if you've been playing the game long enough, you've had both the good ones and the bad ones. Like, I'll readily admit there's been times I've gotten very lucky in like particular situations where, I drew the right card at just the right time, or I remember one time I randomly discarded a card out of my brother's hand. It was like he had 9 cards in hand, and I randomly discarded the only one that was going to let him win the rescue. So basically a 1 in 9. He ends up not getting that rescue, and it ends up costing him the tournament, and I end up getting first in that tournament. So, stuff like that is going to happen both to you and against you when you play this game long enough, and just recognizing that, yeah, there's going to be chance involved. There's going to be, luck, if you want to call it, that involved, and you got to roll with it both ways. And sometimes it's going to go your way, sometimes it's not. And, just kind of recognizing that.
That article was written at, what was it, 2016? So that would be like Cloud of Witness is the newest set at that point. Obviously, we talked earlier about the power level of GOC and where we're at with a game. And it seems like now, if you were to have that bad break happen, that bad beat happen to you, maybe you don't get as much of a chance to recover because you don't have falling away to try to keep up. You don't have a 2-liner, 3-liner soul. You don't have some of these ways to slow the game down, and the game moves at such a fast pace. So how much do you think like the experience and whatnot that you put into that article, how do you think that has adapted and changed with the speed of the game? And do you think the speed of the game changes your ability to be able to come back now, or?
Yeah, and a lot of it comes back to where you're at in the game. Like, so in this particular game that I talk about in the article, like I was, first of all, it was a Type 2 game, and I was winning. Like I had I think it was a 3-1 lead I mentioned in the article. Neither my opponent or myself had played Son of God, New Jerusalem. This is actually, so the game was from 2015 Nationals, and so Son of God, New Jerusalem was the big 2 at the time, and so I'm sitting with a 3-1 lead. I still haven't played Son of God, New Jerusalem yet. Like I'm in a good position. Like the game was not nearly decided yet, but I was certainly, if you want to talk about like tempo or momentum, like I was clearly, in the lead. And then I get a little bit unlucky. My Son of God gets discarded off the top of my deck. for my own card. It was a Jephthah rescue. Actually, it was a Jephthah battle challenge. So I wasn't even like going after a soul. I was just trying to take out the only two evil characters that he had in territory, and I randomly Jephthah to discard my Son of God. And so part of my ability to recover was the fact that I was already in, I was already ahead as far as like the state of the game. If you're behind, or even like maybe at parity in terms of like where the game's at, and something like that happens, it's probably unlikely you're gonna be able to turn that around, like in today's kind of game, and just like how quickly games can finish once someone starts getting some momentum, and they have an opening where the opponent's Son of God gets discarded with no rescue, something like that. So yeah, I'd say it's harder in today's game, but it still depends on the scenario. If you're already ahead, and the bad break just kind of opens the door for your opponent, that doesn't mean it's gonna that your opponent's gonna be able to pull it off. It just means that now you have to work a little bit harder. But yeah, it's definitely possible that with if you're already behind and something like that happens, and it's like, okay, now you're just maybe trying to fight for a timeout win or something like that, I guess.
Have you ever, in your 20 plus years of doing this, have you ever tried to intentionally put someone on tilt, or make that you see an opening with a situation that goes against them, or maybe goes heavily in your favor, and you just try to push that to get them to play kind of on edge?
I don't feel like I've maybe focused on that. Like, I think there's been times where, like, maybe my opponent, either made a misplay or got unlucky, and then maybe they started like, so they started like, stalling a little bit, or like, spend a lot of time like just kind of bemoaning their bad luck. And then I was kind of like, all right, well, we got to kind of keep this game moving. So it wasn't like I'm trying to press to my advantage, but I'm trying to like actually finish the game. Like, like we've talked about, I know you've talked about like kind of the issue with timeouts and stuff like that. And it's like, well, okay, so I know you just got really unlucky, but we don't have 5 minutes for you to throw your pity party right now. So let's kind of keep going here. I've definitely have done that. And whether that, kept pushing them, that kind of depends on them. Like if they're going to let that be something that, furthers their aggravation, but I'm just, I'm trying to finish the game, and, so I'm not gonna allow them to just, sit there and wallow in their bad luck.
Where's the line if someone does kind of push into that, or lead into that? Because I feel like, I don't want to say any names, but I have seen that at tournaments, maybe in a couple of games at nationals. But where do you think the line of kind of being that person that's trying to make that person uncomfortable with the way that they're playing, maybe play at a faster tempo than they're naturally playing? Obviously, we've got time limits, and you're supposed to be playing at a certain tempo, but you can also be the type of person that's kind of rushing that on, or, I don't know, just trying to get them to play on edge because it gives you an advantage, because you feel like you know your deck well enough, and maybe they don't know theirs. You read into that, and you kind of can lean into that a little bit. How much leaning can you do before it's kind of, it's not really on the up and up, in your opinion?
I guess like the way that I approach that is that, especially in a game that's relevant to, one or both players, competing for the top spot, or, trying to, whether it's, making top cut, or, if it's a game that's relevant to how the tournament's going to finish, I personally think that the only, interactions should just be, like, as far as verbal interactions, should just be the game, the things that are relevant to the game, and not, like making comments, like, like, oh, that was unlucky, or like, oh, I bet you wish you'd attacked with that hero or blocked with that evil character, like, stuff like that. I don't think that should be a part of those games, it's supposed to be, it should be like a fun environment, and I think there's certainly room for kind of that casual feel, but maybe not in the games where there's a lot more on the line. I try to have that kind of respect for my opponent, and I kind of hope that they would do that for me, where if I just had something bad happen and I'm maybe taking a few extra seconds to kind of think about, okay, what do I got to do next, that they're not making comments while I'm trying to think, like that should be, if I want to take my full 90 seconds or the majority of my 90 seconds in my prep phase to to kind of pause and think, then I should have that to myself and not have to deal with someone else making comments. So I always try to not say anything when my opponent is thinking or doing stuff like that, unless I have like an actual a game interaction, like asking for priority, dominant initiative, making a something that I want to do with the game, and then at the same time, if it's a casual last bottom table of booster draft multiplayer type thing, then as far as that goes,
That's where I'll be.
Yeah, and I've been there too, so I'm not, I'm certainly not always at the top tables. When it's a situation like that and something happens, I think it's, you really got to judge the situation. And, if it's something that's not going to be relevant to where people are finishing, then I'd say there's a little more leeway to, like, oh, John, I bet you wish you hadn't put Jerusalem Tower in your booster draft deck. Like, something like that.
I indeed did wish that I had not done that.
Yeah. But yeah, like I do have a pretty good example of that. So there was a game actually at 2016 Nationals. I was actually playing against Jaden in Type 2, and he made a very bad misplay against me, and it basically, what was a pretty back and forth close game ended up kind of being a blowout for me, because of this misplay that he made. But certainly wasn't going to do it to my brother, and I don't feel like I would do it to anyone else. We moved on. I didn't bring it up, and then even after the game I said, hey, don't let this affect you, just shake this one off, go to your next game, play your best game, and you just got to forget about that. And because it was a pretty rough one, and it was one that I ended up winning the tournament that year, and a lot of it was because that game with Jade, and it should have been a game that was a lot closer, and if it was a lot closer, if he would have won, I don't know if I ended up winning the tournament or not. And so yeah, it was just one of those things. And yeah, so that was a situation. That's the kind of situation where I don't want to like rub it in to someone that, like, oh, I got really lucky, or you got really unlucky, or you blew that one. Like, it's a lot of reading the situation, and understanding, like, hey, we all get lucky, we all get unlucky, and there's no need to gloat or to kind of shove it in someone's face. That's kind of the way that I approach it. Others might see it a little bit differently, and that's totally fine, but that's kind of where I come from.
Another thing that I think has kind of come to light in the last couple of nationals, and I think it's also kind of because we're seeing more deck lists shared, and so people are seeing common lines of play within brigades and then within certain archetypes, and then when you play that, And I know that at least a couple of times I've sat down and played a game, and this is one of those that you're talking about the respect of not interjecting a lot of chatter while your opponent's thinking through their plays and their lines of play. But when you've gotten so familiar with it because you've seen people play it in the Lackey Grand Prix, the Zoom Discord Invitational, whatever, and then you know that, hey, we're trying to get these games in quicker. And so, yeah, somebody puts down something like Patmos and they go and get Angel from the Sun or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay, and you're going to play that. And you're going to go get either Justin Martyr or you're going to go get your Matthew. And it's like, okay, calm down. Let me think and do what I'm going to do, whether you know what I'm going to do or not. And I feel like there's a lot of that. Now people recognize lines of play, and now they're trying to let you know that they know what you're doing so you can just go ahead and do it as fast as possible. But then it kind of, on the other side, I know that some people get affected by that to where it's like, stop. I don't care what you think I'm going to do. Let me do it in my own pace because you're messing up my train of thought. And I feel like that's actually happened a considerable amount the last couple of years as people have gotten really familiar with certain decks and lines of play and things of that nature. And also kind of the element of we're trying to get these games in faster, speed them up. How do we do that? You try to let them know, hey, I know what you're doing. Go ahead and do it. But you can throw them off with their line of thought. Is that something that you've seen?
I have. I had a game. I don't want to give too many details on it because I'm not trying to call anyone out, but I definitely had a game where it kind of felt like the opponent was just kind of commentating the whole game, both from their perspective and then what I was doing. It was like they were like live streaming, and so they were commenting on the whole thing. And I'm just like,
it was Jaden.
Again, not giving away any names, no. And it did start to get at me a little bit. I was just like, okay, I just need to ignore this, and I just didn't interact with it at all. Like I just said what I was doing, and made my plays, and just more or less didn't acknowledge any of that. And so it also didn't help that I had a bit of a headache that day, so that certainly wasn't helping matters.
Absolutely not. I would reckon.
But yeah, I would encourage anyone who's listening. Maybe this can be my PSA moment. Try to be respectful, be self-aware. You might know what the opponent's about to do. You don't need to announce it for them. Let them make their decision. There might even be times where you give them a idea that they didn't have.
Yeah. See, I was thinking about that too, to where you're like, you're going to do the thing and then you're going to trigger that, and they might have missed that trigger.
Yeah.
And you just told them, hey, do that.
Yeah. So that's why I don't say a whole lot during my games, unless it's like a game interaction thing. That's always been my style. Especially in the 1v1, like competitive, like game, something's on the line type of games. Obviously if it's a casual game or like a multiplayer, fun game. But there's also been times where, like in multiplayer, and this was kind of a big issue back in the day. This might be a whole nother podcast thing to talk about sometime, but not as relevant now without multiplayer, or mostly without multiplayer. But table talk, and where do you draw the line with table talk? That was a big issue back in the days when multiplayer was obviously one of the categories. And
because if Justin can't get to 1, he can't get 2.
That was that was always the joke. That was I'm pretty sure that was Matt Brinkman who started that, specifically in Type 2 multi, where it was like, Justin can't get to 7 if he doesn't get to 1. That was kind of the rallying cry. But there was also times where I literally got second at a regional tournament in multiplayer because of a table talk thing. And that was the same year I ended up winning Type 1 multiplayer at Nationals. And so that second place at regionals also cost me a chance to get first in RNRS at Nationals, or, after Nationals. So, it was definitely one of the less good things about multiplayer was table talk.
Yeah, I can sense that that would be an issue. I feel like sometimes that it feels like we're crossing the line when we do teams as well. The whole like you were there in Iowa when Jeremy's telling me how to basically run this deck I've never played.
Yeah, well,
okay, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I think with teams, it's better in teams because it's like, okay, it's established that you and your teammate can help each other, and to me that makes sense. But yeah, the issues in multiplayer, I'm not going to start a whole long story, but the kind of the short version is someone literally said, "Hey, attack me, I'll give you the lost soul so Justin can't get it." Like, was basically what they said out loud, in a multiplayer game. Like, attack me instead of him, and then I'll just give it to you, and then Justin won't be able to rescue.
That definitely sounds like a line of talk that I've heard several times at multiplayer. So, like, attack me and I'll just give it to you.
Yeah, that can definitely lead to some saltiness, I guess you could say, when when stuff like that comes up, and again, it ends up costing someone where they end up finishing in the tournament. So
definitely see that, and maybe your public service announcement there will fall on some ears that, like, it's one of those things to where you don't want to directly complain to someone about it, but it's like, if I could just wring your neck while we're playing this game, I'd probably do it. And it seems like, I mean, I don't think anybody intentionally does that to try to gain an advantage or make you, and maybe it's kind of maybe in someone's head they're doing the thing that I mentioned earlier where you're trying to get someone to play on edge or whatever. But I think it's really just kind of innocent and not meant harmful, but it's like they're oblivious to how it impacts your thinking during a game.
Yeah. I mean, some people just, they process out loud, and, and I don't think I would have minded as much if the other person was just, like, processing what they were doing. Like, that's totally fine. If they want to, play as if they're, live streaming and they've got an audience listening to them, I guess, that's them. But where it really started to get to me was, like, every time I made a play, the opponent was, like, commenting on that play. And it's like, I don't need that, thanks. I know what this does.
Yeah, fair enough. So I guess that will be all of the stuff that I had to go over. And I'll make sure to link that original article again back from, I believe it's 2016.
Yep.
Learning from our peers, the bad beat or whatever. I'll link that on the podcast so you guys can go and check it out. It's on Land of Redemption, but we'll link that. Brad, I feel bad. You've been hanging out with us all night. I've been doing all the talking. I'm sorry.
No, man, it's all good. It's always cool hearing from somebody that's got so much wisdom about the game. It's like, because we, especially like me and you, I mean, I don't know when you become not a new player. It still feels like we're a little new, even though we've been in it, I guess, 4 years now. But comparatively, you can always learn a lot from people who've been around for a long time and have seen a lot of different situations. So I'm cool with just listening to it.
Okay, well, I guess that will be all I have. Do you got anything you want to leave with the people, Mr. Guardian himself?
I don't know. I guess just that I'm looking forward to being more involved this season. That's my plan. Obviously I can't promise anything. I can't guarantee anything. Sometimes God has other plans. Sometimes life has other plans. But I definitely want to be more involved this season and try to sharpen my skills to maybe take a run at a Type 1-2 player at Nationals next year. Like I said, I went in this year, kind of basically the past 2 years, 22 and 23, certainly not expecting to compete for the top, and more or less just, hoping I finished more or less like, 500, so to speak, wins and losses, which is pretty much what I did the past 2 years. But hopefully I can, stay more on top of things, and definitely would like to take a crack at maybe getting that Type 1-2 player title. That's that one and booster draft are the only two that I haven't won. I did have a top 3 in booster draft 1 year, so
Someone's gonna have to kidnap Booster Jones if you want to win that thing.
I mean, he can't get an absurd pull like that every year. I mean, I know he's done it like twice now, but come on, like, man, I feel like I've never had like either of his booster draft decks. Like, I've never drafted a deck as good as those, like, in any tournament, like, ever. Like, and I've done booster drafts with, like, 8 packs, and he still can't pull as much good stuff as he did. So
It's crazy because in the district tournaments that I've done with him, in the state tournaments that we've done together, regionals, he's always got a really good deck. And I don't, you want to talk about, you said the bad beat could be something that happens bad to you, or just you're really lucky for your opponent, or whatever. He's got the luck aspect to where if you're playing booster against him, the bad beat is just that you're playing against him.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes.
That's
Brad figured that out at Nationals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I came up against him first round. I was like, yeah, we drafted 2 different decks here.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's crazy. Like, just looking at his deck, and it's like there's like 5 or 6 cards in his deck that like are all better than my best card. Like, like how does how does that even happen? Like, and obviously it's not to take anything away from him as a player, but it's like, yeah, pretty much, you can take your handful of top players currently in the game, and I'm not even like, I don't even consider myself like a top player like at this point, or like, these past couple of years. But I feel like I could have taken Brian's deck and probably won with it. Like, it's, any experience, like well experienced, or, like a top player that, even if they're not, maybe if they're even like a newer player, like those people can take a deck that's got like what he had, and I feel do pretty well. And, credit to him for pulling it off. Like, they still got to play it. Like, you still can't make mistakes. And
Credit to Brad for giving him the deck.
Yeah.
Helping giving it to him. Good job, Brad.
Hey, secretly, we actually had something going, so, I passed him all my good cards. That was some of that table talk we were talking about. I was like, hey, dude,
yeah.
if you'll share the winning prize with me, I'll send you.
So he gave you half of a Son of God.
Someone check Brad's binder for the promos that.
Well, I guess we'll get ready to leave it there. Definitely want to thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Justin, for coming on, kind of sharing a little bit of your re-entry into the game. And I heard it here. I don't know if you guys heard it, but pick up on it. He said he is challenging for Type 1-2 player at Nationals. So the Guardian is coming for the title.
Yep.
And Jaden doesn't yet have a Type 1. No, he has a Type 1-2 player. What's the one he doesn't have? Is it Sealed?
Yeah, sealed. Yeah, sealed and booster.
Okay. And you need Type 1 and booster.
Yep.
And then, so we're trying to see which brother completes the set first, right?
Yeah, so Jordan, I think Jordan is still, I'd have to go back and check, but as of like a year or 2 ago, Jordan was the only person to have a top 3 finish in all the categories at Nationals, and that's including the multiplayer categories. So I know there's obviously, without the multiplayer categories aren't official categories anymore. So maybe there's somebody else that's now finished in the top 3 in all 5 of the current categories. But Yeah, so that's kind of my first goal, is to get that top 3 finish, and if we get to the top 3, and then might as well go all the way, right? Like get the first place.
Might as well.
Might as well.
As long as they all come back to the fortress.
Yeah. As long as it's staying in the fortress. So.
Well, I guess we'll get ready to end it there. Reminder that the Zoom Discord Invitational signups are open right now, so get with Rob M. Let him know you want to play. And then, hopefully, I'm not lying to you guys this week, and Jared will be doing a House of Highlights tournament on Discord. You can go ahead and check that out. If I am wrong, I'm sorry. And if we get to 100, what did you say, Brad? 100 streams, listens to the podcast episode before signups close for the Zoom Discord Invitational, that you and I will both sign up. We finished the last one at 93, 94.
I'm thinking it needs to be 101 this week.
101.
Just because.
I mean, I'll listen twice if that's what it takes.
101 listens.
Yep. But anyway, I think we're closing in on, it's either 7,000 or 8,000 total streams, and none of that includes like YouTube. For some reason, YouTube isn't included into their stats. So apart from YouTube, people that listen on YouTube, I think we're closing in. It's either 7,000 or 8,000 total streams or listens since we've started the podcast. So 65 episodes. That gives you kind of an average of. We're doing steady numbers. I think. Yep. Definitely feels like it's worth sitting in a closet and recording a podcast. So.
Well, I appreciate
that's
you.
That's a good baseline.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me back on. It was really fun to do the first one, and I'm glad we even got to do a little bit of a longer one this time. So, yeah, hopefully I'll get to come back on with you again sometime, and maybe as we get closer to Mr. Classic, to have another Mr. Classic intro series. That'd be pretty sweet. Yeah,
where you're doing some trash talking and gonna take the title from your brother, right?
Maybe a little bit of that'll have to happen. Just to play the mind games. Those can happen before the tournament. Like I said, I don't want to play the mind games during the game, but going into the tournament, we could definitely play some mind games.
That sounds cool. Definitely thank you guys for listening. Thanks for being on, and we'll end it there. Peace.
Peace.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of the Threshing Floor podcast. As always, want to thank you guys for, tagging along with us, listening, and being fans of the podcast. Want to thank Covenant Games for always sponsoring the podcast. And just a reminder that we've got a House of Highlights tournament coming up this Friday. Maybe get in there, play some games. Even if you're not playing, come hang out. If I'm available, I'm going to pop in there and just hang out. So you've got that. Also sign up for the Zoom Discord Invitational. Week 1 pairings for the Lackey Grand Prix Series 12 is out. So make sure you play in those games. And we'll catch you next time. Peace.